Hey everybody, welcome to just an impromptu stream tonight. If you're joining me, we're going to be working on some pyro effects tonight in Houdini, and just had an idea for something for the stream here for an element that I wanted to create, and so I'm just going to give it a shot, see what happens. Don't really have much of a plan here, but going to just play around. If you guys have any questions about, what it is I'm doing or things that I'm trying out or whatever, feel free to drop them in the chat. Also, just let me, if you got any questions or just want to say hey or, ask anything, please feel free to put it in the chat. So I'll try to do my best to explain what I'm doing here as I'm kind of going to be playing around a little bit and figuring some stuff out. Yeah, so I'm going to dive in. So the first thing we need to do is create a source here for for a pyro effect. And well, first of all, I'm going to save my project so that I am working in something that will actually be useful. Let's see. Call this explosion bar. Always nice to set up your file and everything as soon as you can, because obviously things start to get saved in your to your directory. A lot of things want to save to your $hip directory, or if you set it up to a job directory as well, $job. So those are always good things to get. Make sure you're starting with saving and all that kind of stuff. So so let's call this explosion bar. Cool. All right. I am going to make GeoNode, and I'm going to call this. I've been recently naming my stuff with the sim or geo, depending on what the element is that I'm creating. So sometimes, if I'm making like a helper object or whatever, I'll call it sim and then give it a name that I can that I can keep track of or whatever. So I'm going to call this Pyro source, and I got this color scheme kind of from a group, or from a group of videos that I had watched on CG Circuit, and he actually uses like purple for I think for simulation and stuff, and then he uses red for like rendering and green for geo and stuff like that. So I've kind of kept that same coloring structure for myself. So like when I'm trying to do for example, like sim, I'll do like a light purple for my pyro source, and then if I want to do another geometry here and call this sim, I'll just call this sim pyro. And then that way I know that like, oh, and I'll color this darker. So then I know that this is my pyro sim right here, and this is my pyro source. If I was doing geometry, I probably would name that and put it usually on this side. I kind of like to work left to right, just what I kind of do here. So, all right, so let's do a pyro. Let's do the pyro burst source, and I'll drop that down. Give it a second here. It's kind of creating its own little takes a second to kind of load. And then this is a cool node because it actually gives you kind of a burst shape to start with. This is new, I think maybe Houdini 18.5, something like that. And it kind of gives you a nice little explosion source to start with here. So what I'm thinking I want to do with this is actually have it exploding to the side. I actually want to use that bar that's in the stream and have an explosion kind of travel down it, that it's masked or whatnot. And just, when things happen on the stream, that'd be like a little graphic that might play or whatever. So, for this, what I'm thinking of doing is having the burst go to the side. So I'm thinking it's going to come from the right side of the screen to the left. So I'm going to set the direction of this up here to be, it should be -1, 0. And so now you can see that this burst is actually going to be traveling to the side here like this. Another thing I'm going to want to do is make sure that it's not expanding so much. So I'm going to bring the spread angle down a bit. I don't want to go too crazy, but you know, maybe we'll try like 15 degrees. I don't know. Let's see. You can see that this is obviously creating a pretty tight cone. Um, and what I can do here with this roundness is change how extreme kind of they are. It's kind of like how normalized they are in a sense. I'll leave that right there. Initial size, I want to bring that down a little bit because I don't think I want it to be quite so big. You know, kind of what I'm thinking is the burst would come from the side of the screen like that and, you know, come in and kind of go across the screen. I'm actually going to add a camera to my scene real quick just so I can keep, you know, a reference frame here. So I'm going to control click on camera. That's going to add a camera right at the position I'm at. And I'm going to just kind of zero out my rotations so that I don't have any anything that's going to be like, you know, adjusting, you know, for tilts or things like that. So one nice thing is that they give you this little handy tool right in the middle here where you can use this to dolly or, you know, kind of transform to the right or left, up and down, in and out. So I can kind of just use this to line up where I want this, you know, explosion to start from. In fact, what I could even do here, since I know kind of what my view is going to be here, I'll just set up the camera view just so I have it. So it's going to be 1920, and I believe that element is something like 84 pixels wide, which is obviously really tight. Yeah, that's going to be a little tight. Let's see. Maybe I'll move out a little bit and over and just let this kind of... I think what I'm going to do is actually start it like this so that it explodes like that and comes in. I'm also going to tighten this up a little bit because I think I'm really going to want it to be, you know, quite a bit tighter here. So maybe 2.5 just to make it nice and even. So that's just going to go across like that. Now under burst animation, we should be able to adjust how far the expansion is, you know, the duration of it, the start frame, things like that. So from this, let's give it just a touch more, maybe like 4. Let's see how that does. Kind of silly to get too far into some of these details before we have our actual Pyro stuff working in here. This is obviously just a particle-based source for us to start. So it's kind of silly before we see exactly how this is working to, you know, overly tweak things and get into the weeds. So kind of just thinking about where this effect is going to start from more than anything. So what I can also do here, the initial size here that I tweaked allows me to kind of make sure that it's, you know, hiding kind of in that first frame so that I won't be seeing any of it before it bursts on here. So what I'm expecting is for it to be kind of a full explosion to about right there. Then this will turn off and the Pyro sim will just kind of continue on from that point. So this is going to inject all the things into it that we're going to need, you know, temperature fields. We're going to inject a density field, I believe a flame field as well. That's kind of the newest way that they're working in Pyro. In this more simplified kind of version, that's just strictly in SOPs or in geometry context. So if you were working in Pyro and DOPS, that is that's quite a bit more complicated, and they have a lot more that you can dive into there. But they've created some really nice tools that give you a ton of flexibility and freedom just in SOPs alone. So it kind of makes sense to just work in here, especially when I'm not looking for something that's going to be super interactive with other elements. There's not going to be anything else really going on in here. I just literally want a big fireball to kind of go across the screen. So yeah, so I'm not sure what else I'm really going to need here. I could set up some different things here. Like, you know, the trailing separation here is the point separation. in this, kind of cloud of points here. So I'll just keep that at default right now. Number of trailings, we can probably turn that down a little bit um, since we don't really have them spreading out. The more that we have, the density, the higher the density those are right in the middle there, it's going to kind of create this sort of just like ball. It's not going to really have any shape to it to start. So you don't want to just, you know, whatever you start with is a huge part of how your simulations evolve. The more organic and random nature that you can kind of inject into your simulation from the start, the better it gets as it goes along. So yeah, so I think that's going to be a good spot to start there. I upped the trailings up a little bit. I mean, maybe it's going to be, 75, maybe it's going to be, somewhere in there. I don't know. I'm just kind of playing around, seeing what feels right. I am going to check this little lock right here. You can see that the screen turned red, or turned off from red. Basically, that just means that if I move my camera, it's just going to jump out of that camera position and not move it at all. If that gear was locked, it would keep me rotating that camera position, and then I would lose that, as I got closer and farther and stuff like that. And then the nice thing here is I can just jump right back into cam 1, and it's right there. If I want to, zoom in, look at things, like this, it works out to keep my camera in the same spot. So that is kind of my little initial burst here. We'll see how this works. Not sure. It's a pretty tight cone. Maybe it'll make more sense to spread it out just a little. I don't know. It's going to be a little different. I've never really made an element quite like this, rather than like an explosion or something like that. So we'll see. So what we have right now is we have, I'm just middle clicking here, and I can see I've got burn, I've got CD, which is color, I've got density, things like that, temperature, velocity. We can see my velocity right there if I turn that on. So I've got all these attributes, and I need to kind of get them moving over towards a Pyro sim. So I obviously need them to turn into volumes to be able to then inject into my simulation. So there are actually some quick setups up here now that they've included. And so what I could do here is go up to my quick setups and do like source volume, and that'll actually source my volumes here as you would assume. And you can see that this is now turned that into a volume. As I right click here, I've got burn, density, temperature, velocity volumes that are all in there. They're all voxel size of 0.01. I'll just kind of show you where all these things are here. So there's my voxel size of 0.01. Yeah, and I got 40 VDBs in here, which is just a nicer kind of little bit lower memory footprint volume that we can work with. The default volumes in Houdini are a little bit larger, and VDBs are a little bit more. It's kind of where everything's moving towards a little bit more, it seems like, in their development. I can't say that for 100% sure, but most of the time things are in VDBs now. So, so this is good. Gives us a Pyro source here. And we've got our rasterized volume. Now, the thing with the volume is that it's a little bit low voxel scale, or low voxel size, so we don't have a lot of detail in this. So there's a couple different things that we kind of have to play around with here as we're going through this. One of the things is obviously voxel size. Other thing is particle size. This is going to be, how big these particles are that it's, kind of feeding into this source. And you can see here as I go up and down, kind of, you can imagine there's a sphere around each point that will be, getting larger as we go, and and that kind of envelops a larger part of the voxel field and creates more, density, velocity, all that kind of stuff. So these are kind of the two settings that we deal with. As the voxel size goes down, like, so if I set this to 0.05, we're going to get a lot more detail in here, but we're going to pretty quickly load in a ton more voxels into all this here. You can see now I'm at, oh, look at that, 666,000 voxels, and that's just for my source. It's something that Houdini can handle just fine as far as in the viewport performance. You can see I still have 120 frames a second. Your mileage may vary. I do have a 3090 on my computer, so that's a little bit. It can handle a lot of stuff in the viewport and not really slow down very much. But for the most part, any graphics card that's modern is going to be able to handle quite a bit in the viewport here. So not a ton of voxels, but we're starting to get somewhere here. So that's looking good. The only thing I might do here is just add some these trailing separations are a little bit there's a little bit too much separation in here, I feel like. So I'm just gonna just bring this down just a little bit here, maybe to 0.05. Yeah, that looks good. Let's take a look at what's going on over here now. And yep, I'm gonna have to kind of play with this, but I think I'm gonna keep the particle scale at 1. These do have a P scale on them, so I believe that is actually getting adjusted by that. So so it's actually adjusting based on the scale of the particles that's being fed out of this. If I look at the geometry spreadsheet here, we can see the P scale of the points, and they're all like different random sizes and things like that. But it looks like they're all under 0.1. Excuse me. So that'll kind of keep us in a smaller, much smaller individual particle size that the voxels are trying to be created from. So starting to get that. The only other thing I might add in a little bit here, since you can look and see, like, if we look at these points, they all are going to be going perfectly in this, radial direction away from origin. From 0, 0. So I want to add a little bit of randomness into this whole process here. So we don't have just, excuse me. So we don't have, perfect vector, motion, velocity vectors coming off of each of these points. So I'm going to add in a vector, an attribute adjust vector node here. Just add in a little bit of velocity randomization. So as we watch this here, you can see here it's selecting attribute V. What I'm going to want to do is direction and length. I'm going to just do, I'll just do add, and I'll do some noise to it. You can see now that this has gotten quite a bit crazier here. As we see, they're now pointing in all sorts of different directions. I don't want the amplitude to be that big, because that obviously will just override the actual, direction that they're traveling in and just add in a ton of amplitude. So what I want to do is just give it a little extra. Maybe we'll try 0.1. And we'll do this 0 centered so that it's not all going in one direction. And if you see here, the positive, if we had it set to positive, it's only going to be able to push it in one direction. But if we do 0 centered, that means it can push it back, up, down, any direction, because we're not just adding 0 to 1, which when you look at that that velocity vector, that direction is pointing in this direction here. So there's actually, if you were trying to add in only positive values, it's trying to add in a velocity vector that's going up this way. And so it can never really move around truly normally or randomly and add in these different directions and things like that. If you're just doing it, from strictly positive, you can see here, actually, probably if I go far enough with this, most of it is pushing it this direction, so a lot of it is all kind of moving in that same direction, that 1, 1, 1 vector direction. So that's why you would use 0 centered, and then you get quite a bit better random values in your, especially with vectors. So let's just add in a little bit here. I don't know, maybe 0.5. I'm going to turn the element size down a little bit. We should see this kind of shift around a little bit here. Cool. Great. So there's some random velocities in there. That way we don't have all uniform velocity values being put into our Pyro into our Pyro source. So let's look down here again. Great, everything looks fine there. We could turn on this velocity blur setting, and what that's going to do is actually blur in the direction that the volumes are traveling in, that the point velocities are. So it actually kind of stretch out your volume, but I don't think we're going to need that in this case. So let's just keep that off for now. Great. Yeah, I think that's looking good. The only other thing I might adjust a little bit is add some noise. So I'm just going to do attribute adjust float as well. And now this sets up as P scale to begin with. And yep, as my, oh boy, I might have just freaked my computer out there for a second. So what you can see here is that what I was saying before is 100% true, that the P scale is driving the scale of those, the spheres that are basically being sampled around each of those points by the volume rasterize attributes. I'm going to try to kill this so it doesn't go too crazy. There we go. All right, let's go back up to this. Cool. All right. There we go. So now this was adding, 0.25. If I go back to 0, we're good. So yeah, as I add in 0.1, you can see that this gets, these, the area around these points is being sampled further away, basically. So we don't want to mess with P scale, but just to kind of illustrate the fact of what we were doing here. So what I'm actually going to do is add in a little bit of probably density. Can I do multiple in here? No, I can't. Okay. I'm just going to do some density noise, do some noise, and just do set always. And then this should, I'm just going to bring up my velocity or my geometry spreadsheet here so I can see what's going on. So I'm just going to pull this up, split the pane top and bottom, and then just go back to my scene view here. It's just kind of a quick way to set up my my viewport. Fortunately, the actual viewport will be a little smaller, but at least I can see what my attributes are doing down here. So if I look at density here, we can see that it is going to be adjusting that based on these values here. And in fact, what I actually want to do is probably just multiply this by 0 to 1 so that as these values come in here and are set by this Pyro burst source, now I can come down here and just change, how much is being, adjusted by these by the attribute adjust float. So what I want to do here is this is going to be multiplying by 0 to 1. What I want to do, if you're just thinking about it purely mathematically, is I probably don't want to go all the way down to 0 because then my densities will be starting to get really low, down to like 0.1. I don't really want that. So I'm just going to do this to like 0.8. And then that way I can keep it relatively high, but with a little bit of noise. And so for some reason, that's weird. There's ones in there that have 0. That's weird. That's coming from that as well. But that might be because that's coming from certain parts of this, these elements here that are creating density. Some might not be. So that's probably all it is. I'm just going to turn the element size down a little bit so we can see a little bit more, randomization here in this. And that's probably better. Yep, a little bit more random values in there. And I'm also going to throw one of these in here as well and do one for temperature. If I can spell. Also, I could just pull this down and just select temperature here. So it looks like the ones that have density don't have temperature. And then, the ones that don't have density do have temperature. I see. So there's burn ones in here. There's, so each separate section has their own attribute, basically. So So that's how they have this set up here. So I'm just gonna do the same thing here, but I want to make sure that I can offset this a little bit. So I'm just gonna do some random numbers in there just to offset it by, you know, a random amount or whatever. And that way we're not getting the exact same values randomized for each of those. So, all right, cool. So now I should have this in here. That's looking good. And then I can just come down here and I'm actually gonna, I'm gonna do a null because I'm gonna reference this in another node so that I can be trying to be a little clean with this here. And I'm just gonna call this out Pyro source. Within my geometry nodes, I usually color it green if it's an output node or null. And so I'll come up here, go back into here and do an object merge. This will be somewhat of a small project to do this on, but I like to keep, like to try to do the things the way I normally would do them. So, all right, cool. That brought that in. Interesting. That must be a new, oh no, never mind. So yeah, I'm just going to call this in Pyro right here. I usually color my inputs red just for visual sake in the viewport. And I'm just going to pull this down because I probably don't need to see that right now. And then I'll do a Pyro solver. Now this is in, this is the SOPs Pyro solver. This is a little bit different than how it would be if you were working in a DOP network with a standard dynamics situation in Houdini. This is, again, like I said, a newer way to work in here. You can see that this is its own HTA that you can dive into. These are where you would put in things like advection to give forces to the to the explosion or fire or whatever. Forces, different sources in here could be put in as well. So this is kind of an interesting way to do things. It's a little different than how it used to be typical to work with Pyro in Houdini. And the interesting thing too here is when you jump in here, there's actually some grayed out networks here. Now I'm not sure if you have like Apprentice or anything like that. No, I think Apprentice would let you do it. But if you don't have like a pay, the full version of Houdini, if you don't have Houdini effects or like Indie or something, I don't know if you can actually go into these and take a look at them, but it's kind of cool. They've got an actual DOPNet in here that does all the simulations and stuff like that. But when you jump into this node here by double clicking, it actually jumps kind of past that into this forces section here. If we go back up and look, there's forces right there. So I'm not sure if you can set these up to be able to, work to actually edit these and stuff like that. Like if I right click on this and allow editing of contents, I actually jump into this network and I could tweak things and do all sorts of different stuff in here. I'm not sure if that's the case for all versions of Houdini. I do have a paid version, so that might be slightly different, but if you can, it's kind of cool. You can go through and see how they set it up and what they actually did in there to kind of create these different digital assets. But I'm just going to go back and match this to current definition. Now we're back to where we were. And I'm just going to up the cache memory a little bit just so I have like 128 gigs of RAM in here, which I would really like to upgrade at some point in the not too distant future. But so be careful with that. Don't go too crazy with this. If you only have like 32 gigs of RAM, don't set this to 48 because you are going to use all of your RAM in your computer, and then you could crash Houdini or something and be really aggravated with yourself after the fact. But I know that I should be fine with that kind of level of cache. So let's just kind of see what's going on here. Yep, it just kind of explodes and goes up. So we're gonna have to do some trickery here because we can't have we want it to actually go. Let's see here. Let me play this back. We want it to go across and not up. The other thing we don't want is we don't want this to just dissipate so quickly like that. We want to add in some other nice elements and things like that. So we're gonna have to do some tweaking here to get this to look right, but it's, you know, it's doing something. We got a Pyro sim going. It's very low voxel resolution stuff. So one thing I'm actually gonna do here real quick is I'm gonna set this so that my Pyro solver is actually creating the what do you call it, the resolution of the node that's driving the creation of these sources. So there's so many different ways, obviously, to do everything in here. But in fact, one thing I could have done differently here, just to show you a different kind of way of doing this, since this is just kind of whatever, would be that if I reset the simulation, I don't know why there's a default. Maybe there is defaults in there. That's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. That's just my ghosted object. I was like, that's weird. Why is that showing up? Another thing I could do is I could do like an initialize explosion here in these quick setups, and this should actually oh, I'm sorry. That's just going to set up my sourcing. Excuse me. It's not going to actually add in the nodes above it. They've added this in, and I haven't played with all these things yet, to be completely honest. But there are a lot of things in here that are really helpful. Like, for example, if we're over in this Pyro solver and we go down to create Pyro look, this will create a Pyro look below it, and this node allows you to work with, you know, with the setting, you know, kind of takes in these VDBs that are created in here, or in this case, the volumes that are created here, and you know, creates a look directly in kind of in the viewport that you can kind of one-to-one expect to see when you get down to when you get to rendering and things like that, and shading. So you know, for example, we can turn on these different elements here, and, you know, really kind of dial in what we want our effect to look like. So like in this case here, we've got our scatter. We'll up some, you know, do some density here. And, you know, you can kind of play around with this. Obviously, we don't have the sim going to the level that we really want it to be yet. But and in fact, the masking is probably taking up quite a bit of our look here. But there's a whole bunch of different stuff in here that we can do and kind of drive our sim with. But what I'm going to do first, is I'm going to copy this parameter here, my voxel size, go up using, I clicked on the timeline. I'm going to go up using U, go up into my Pyro source here, and I'm going to paste that into my volume rasterized attributes. So I'm going to paste that into paste relative references into here. And that actually creates a reference that looks to that Pyro Solver 1 division size to create the volume sources in here. So you can see now that this is incredibly low resolution. I don't think we have very many voxels in here yet. Like, what do we got? Like 14,000 here. So we're going to need to up that a little bit. And in fact, what I often like to do is just have this be just a touch higher. Or a finer resolution. So I usually will do something like dividing it by 2 or something, just to give it just a little bit more detail in the input, and then allow the simulation to kind of go from there. So whether or not that's exactly the right solution here is, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's not the best solution, but if anybody has a good, you know, better solution for that, or a good way to calculate that, let me know. But so now when I change this, so if I change this to 0.5, my resolution of my sim will get quite a bit more detailed. You can see here now we've got a much nicer looking simulation that's coming in here. And in fact, when I go into here, you can see there's already starting to be a little bit more detail in this as well. Another thing to be mindful of in the viewport is that there are optimizations for working with volume. So like if I hit D to go into my display options and go into texture here, your 3D texture will be limited to 128, 128, 128 by default. I have unchecked that, so it should allow us to see more than that. So if we go in here and look at this, right now we can see that that's at 80, 64, 64. And what I would in fact like to do is kind of crank that up just a little bit more. So let's go down to 0.25 or 0.25, and there we go. We're starting to get much nicer quality of this pyro explosion. We still have quite a bit of work to do with it, but you can see here that this is already starting to give us some nicer, you know, setting, values to be able to get a nice looking pyro sim out of it. So, so what if I turn this off? I don't know if this will reset it. No, it wouldn't, but I can actually tweak this and go up and down in my max visualization resolution here. So you can see that as I get past, actually it's probably close to 128, it's going to snap to its highest value and it's not down converting anymore. Look at that. It is actually at 128 exactly. So in this scenario, there's not actually even any, you wouldn't even see any difference. But for sure, as you start getting down to finer and finer resolutions for your voxels, you would see some resolution changes that you would want to, up your resolution and stuff like that. Now I'm getting some blockiness in there, which is interesting, and I have a feeling that has to do something with my yeah, it looks like it's right in there. So I have a feeling that has to do with my my sim and some of the bounds resizing and stuff like that are that's happening. But we'll work with that in a second. I don't think that'll be anything that'll be too hard to make work. But great. So we have a pyro solver here that's going to be starting to do this. And the first thing I want to do is get, excuse me, I want to get my explosion to be moving in the right direction. So I want it to start moving to the left. So density, temperature, burn. Yep, that all looks right. That looks like that's all the stuff that we want for the explosion. So what we want to set here is the shape. So we have the buoyancy set in here, scale of 1. We also have the gravity acceleration. And so that is actually going to be is set right now to -1. So if I set this to 1, just as a for example, and rerun this sim here, it's going to go down, which looks absolutely ridiculous because it's like falling smoke. It looks really silly. So we can control the direction of that buoyancy, which normally is up with hot things. If you were doing something like dry ice or whatever, you'd want your buoyancy to be down because obviously that would be something that would actually drop down. But in this situation, we want it to be in the -1 x direction. So you can see right here we have -1 and +1 in the x axis. So I'm just going to set this to -1, this to 0. And now our buoyancy should actually go in the direction we want it to. Nope, I'm wrong. So it should be to 1. I was thinking of it the opposite direction. So there it goes. Kind of just like a normal explosion now, but it's going sideways. So let's take a look at what this looks like here in our camera. So there it goes up like that. And yeah, in fact, I think what's happening here is that it's running into the edge of this this boundary of the sim, and that's what's creating some of those like little notches and things like that that you're seeing in the look here. Yeah, so I think what it's doing is that this is some voxel kind of boundary issues that are going on up here. So we'll tweak that, fix that in a second here. So but yeah, so our explosion is now going to the right, and it's a little strange, but it's working. Thing I'm not super thrilled with is that like explosion is kind of sitting there, that kind of explosion source isn't really doing anything until we get um, a few frames in. So I have to see what we can do with that as well. Um, Trying to think if if there are settings in here that will allow us um, to have the make sure that it's simulating it as soon as it's injected um, into the Pyro um, node here, so that we're not um, so that these force there's going to be forces that are going to start acting on it, as it's moving here. So um, the other thing that I could do is have it so that none of that actual original source material is in the frame, and then we just let it kind of come across. That's possible too, so we can always play with that. But all right, let's go into here. Fields. Yep, flame temperature density. Yes, this is what I want to do. I want to add density where the flame is. So let's see what happens with that, because I want it to actually be, as it's burning and doing all that stuff, I want there to actually be density um, being added into the simulation. I don't want it to just be, a flame that's going through. I actually want there to be some density that's getting injected into this as well. Um, Other thing maybe I don't need in this, I'm going to go back up to my source. Maybe I don't need these to have um, attributes, have randomizing those attributes. Let's see, maybe that was unnecessary. No, that still seems to look roughly the same. Um, Let me just make sure by resetting this that I'm not keeping any values in there that, oh yeah, I was actually keeping some in there. That looks so funny with a square like that. Um, Let me see what I can do here to create um, a little bit more density at the beginning here, so that this stays quite a bit longer and doesn't just dissipate here. So let me go into this Pyro source here. What I'm going to do as well is just change this look a little bit so that we can get a little bit more, density in here. Yeah, there's a fire intensity scale. Cool. As well on the export here, I want to convert these to VDBs. I'm just going to kind of create these as a little bit lighter element so that we're not, when they're VDBs, they're going to play back quite a bit faster and smoother and stuff. And they're not going to be quite as dense from just from a viewport standpoint. So, okay, we've got those fields exporting good. Sourcing. I'm just going to up this a little bit on the resizing just to make sure that we're getting, that's not causing us to run into any issues here. Yeah, that's looking like that's starting to create what we want. There we go. So we were just resizing quite a little bit too restrictively. There we go. Let's see if that helps us. Yeah, great. All right, I'm just going to do the padding to be 1. Still have a little bit there at the end. I don't know why it's still doing that. Got a little bit there. No, let's just do it to 2. Yep, that's looking right. I see the velocity field is getting kind of angry at me there because it's got quite a bit of velocity details in there. If you look at the velocity field here, you got 16 million voxels for that alone. And the rest really aren't super high. So unfortunately, the velocity field is. Let me turn this expand by velocity back on and just see if that. No, no, that's actually worse. How funny. Um, so what I'm going to do is just set this to a maximum size. Oops, excuse me. Is it doing that? Usually what you do is you just go into, there we go. So I'm just going to I hit escape and then enter, and that usually brings up the handles for this node. And so I'm just going to resize kind of the starting boundary size here and just limit this so that we're not going to get just this infinitely large, explosion or whatnot. So let me just go here to the camera. Yeah, we need to expand that quite a bit more. And then I can actually resize this even a little bit further, since there's going to be a lot of stuff happening probably outside of this that we don't need to worry about so much. So why don't we do that and maybe that there. I'm just gonna, excuse me, I'm gonna center this, just change that so that it's not, so that the center of the bounding box is right in line with, the origin. And we probably don't need it so deep. So I'm just gonna pull that. Well, actually, no, I'll leave that for right now. We'll see where this goes. And this actually is probably gonna go past, yeah, it's gonna go past the edges a little bit, but that's okay. We don't need to totally worry about that. In fact, you can see right here that since this is the newer and the setup is set to sparse, that basically means that only activated voxels like these ones in here are actually being used right now. So it's not having to solve all of this other stuff out here. And in fact, we can pull this in quite a bit closer, since that is not expanding as much as I thought it might be. Great. And since we're just going to be rendering this like sliver that's kind of going through here, yeah, that's actually going to look all right. It's not going to look too bad. I don't want it to dissipate quite so quickly, so that's one thing I want to tweak. I also don't want it to have that smooth edge to it that looks horrible, so I'm going to tweak that as well. And I might just bring up the voxel size just a little bit so that it'll run a little bit faster. We can kind of iterate a little bit quicker through our process here. So, all right. So the bounds are set there. We can set, I'm going to set this padding back just a little bit. I'll set it to 1. It's not going to make a huge difference right now, and it's just going to keep this moving a little bit faster. In fact, we could set up back to, set it 2, I think. Set it back to that. 2.5. Yeah, that's enough. That's enough resolution to at least be able to see what it is we're doing here. So, yeah. So what I'm going to do is start tweaking some of these other settings in here. We don't even need any collisions. That's fine. If I wanted to, I could add in possibly a little bit more density here. So under volume 1 here is density. I could add the source up to 2. That's going to add in. That's going to source in a bunch more, density into the Pyro sim, and we'll see that here. I believe it's going to look a little darker, but really what I wanted to be doing is doing quite a bit more, kind of leaving more dark sooty stuff as it's going through. So let's look here. We've got density. We're emitting from it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll this forward a little bit here and see what the range, this right here where it's saying the flame range here. I'm just going to compute that. and it's saying it's from 0 to 1. So I think I want it to go, oops, I don't want it to go that high. So I'm just undo that. I'm going to set this down a little bit and up the scale a little bit as well and see where that gets us. Not where I want it to be, unfortunately. I'm also going to have it calculate the speed because that's always nice to use for some of the later stuff we're going to do. Let me set the flame lifespan a little bit more, see if that keeps us. Yeah, there we go. It looks like that's going to add in a little bit of time to that. Density, I don't want it to dissipate quite so fast, so I'm going to set that to like 0.1. And hopefully that'll stick around for a little bit longer as well. Look back at this. There we go. Yeah, this Pyro look node is actually quite a bit nicer for seeing what's actually happening there. Now, you can also set that in here as well under the look tab here. So if I go up to 50 or something like that and set the fire intensity to be, I don't know, 50 as well, it's going to get, sort of close to what this Pyro look is going to be, but ultimately this is a much nicer looking node. You can also use this scatter value, which is quite nice, to get some values in there as well. And as you start to play around with some of these things here, you get a really nice, you get kind of a nicer look. But for now, we'll just leave that where it was. We'll keep playing around in here. Again, if anybody has any questions or anything like that that we can work through or try to play with or whatever, happy to take some time to do that as well. Put it in the chat. I'm just kind of messing around with some Pyro stuff right now. If you'd like to see, something different or whatever, when I get to a spot, I could always switch over and work on something else as well. So I don't want this to be just, everybody just watching me and just doing whatever. So if you are interested, just, please put something in the chat and we'll work from there. So. All right, so let me mess with some of these shape settings here. So one of the first things I like to do is adjust the front of these. So I'm going to add some disturbance into this, and we're going to see where we get with this to begin with. Probably won't be anywhere near where I want it to actually be, and for sure it's not. Oh yeah, look at that. We got quite a bit more density hanging around in this whole simulation. So that's good. We're starting to get a little bit better, long-term look to this. In fact, it might be too long. So let me just change that a little bit. See where that gets us. Yep, cool. Looking good. And let's adjust this shape a little bit here. So what I am going to do is I might up this disturbance a little bit maybe and turn the base block size down. Let's just say to 0.1. And so what I want this to do is this disturbance is going to add kind of like advection or add some stuff that'll kind of perturb that front of that as it goes through this simulation here. So what I want it to start to do is break up those smooth fronts on those on kind of those billowy mushroom cap looking things. And so let's see if I can't get this to work here. Just come out of this so I'm not looking at a skinny little strip like that anymore. Let's see if we can't look at this and see where our disturbance is. Okay, so that's our disturbance field right there. And it is certainly trying to add some stuff to it. It just doesn't seem like it's hitting where exactly I want it to. So you can see this is showing a kind of a slice of what this actual simulation is doing here. So I'm going to use a control field and have it only, let's see what the speed is of this, 0 to 22. All right, we don't need to go all the way to 22. So what this is going to do is inject these velocities into the simulation in that span right there of, speed basically. So from 0 to whatever value. So I don't actually want it to go from 0 because then it's going to be injecting disturbance where there's not any need for it. We really want it to be on the flame front, or the front of that kind of moving mushroom cap there. So I'm going to set this to like 0.01 just to make sure it's not, maybe even higher, 0.05 maybe. Yeah, there we go. That's starting to cut this down a little bit. And then this could go to like, let's just say 10, maybe even 5, so that there's going to be higher velocities added into, the parts of this where, did I just, oh yeah, I just grabbed that by accident. It's like, what just happened there? So let's just look at this as it's going here. Yeah, I just don't think it's adding in enough disturbance probably. So let's try this. Let's try going a little harder with it. See if that adds in what I'm hoping it will. Hmm. Just going to tweak some of these values to see what exactly we're changing here, just so I can. Actually, I was starting to just maybe see some disturbance at the top of that there. Let me see if this keeps rolling through. Yeah, there's definitely some in there. It just seems like the buoyancy is so strong that it looks kind of cool when you look at it like that. It seems like the buoyancy is so strong that it's really overwhelming that disturbance. Yeah, that's looking cool actually. I really like the way that looks. It's just that initial. Just see if I change this. Just thinking of something here. Density. I'm sure they know what they're doing. So the other thing I want to do is, yeah, I could use a little flame expansion in there as well. I'm just going to turn on these settings here. Add in some more forces. Actually, I'll keep shredding off. The flame expansion, yeah, I probably want that on. That basically should be kind of pushing out or adding some, expansion to the system. where there are flames, so that'll actually kind of create this like more pressure to it. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. It looks, well, that's looking pretty cool actually, but I still need to tweak some of those settings to make it to want 800% density. Yeah, I don't want it so much to be just like a puff going by. I want it to be a little bit longer lived. Just as an A/B comparison, I think I'd like to just do a quick flip book just to show you what the difference between these two are. So I'm just going to go down here and start a flip book real quick. End of that. Just gonna stop this. Yep. Yeah, I like the so there that is, and then I'm gonna just turn this disturbance off and hit this button here to create another one and just let this go again. Actually, don't think we'll see that random stuff up at the excuse me, at the front. Um, oh yeah, in fact, um, that disturbance is helping a lot with that breakup there. If you look really, if you look carefully at that, you can see that there's almost like this that like stratification kind of situation going here. It's kind of weird. There's like these lines through it. If I go up to window sequence list here, I can switch back and forth between those two. And you can see the real difference that's happening here. We've got basically just lines going through here, and this is breaking it up quite a bit. And that's the disturbance that's coming into the Pyro simulation. Now, the thing I'm a little frustrated about is that it's not showing up as early here as I would like for it to. Truthfully, that might just be a case of me needing to tweak some of my input settings there. Because it is doing what I want it to do. Like once we get to this stage here where it's breaking everything up and doing all that sort of thing. So let me turn that on. Let me go back up here to my sourcing and make sure I'm not missing anything. Burn flame velocity. Let me just do this here. There we go. That was what I was missing, was the divergence. I bet you this will look quite a bit better now. Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah, that looks a lot better already. What that divergence obviously does is just makes this um a much bigger initial explosion. And we're not we're kind of starting with a bigger um flame front basically of the simulation. So you can see it's kind of going through there. Let's see what this looks like through this node. Yeah, yeah, we're getting a much better, a much better solution now. Volumes and made sure that and kind of set them to what they figure a what a oh sorry, I think I just did something weird there. What a standard, explosion simulation in Pyro should be. And so it added in this burn divergence field. Now, I actually don't know if I have burn. Oh, yes, I do have pushing that out more. So let me also just up my velocity a little bit. I'm wondering if that's going to help with this initial shaping here. No, still needs a little something there at the beginning, I feel like. Not 100% sure what it is, but it feels like it needs something. Don't always know what it is. You got to play around a little bit sometimes. So that's why this is, that's why I'm looking to make um, this kind of as just like something where people can come and hang out and learn more about this. So I'm not the one with all of the answers here. Just trying to figure some stuff out. So and teach whatever we can. So apparently I knocked something over. Anyways, um, ooh. Well, you know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to take a little break here. Been streaming for about an hour, 20 minutes or whatever. So I think I'm going to take a quick break and, maybe do a little coffee break. If you are interested, this, the video that I'm going to be putting up, I actually just made for the stream, and I will be going through and showing how I made it and, some of the little techniques behind that tomorrow night in my normally scheduled time. So take a coffee break, go get something to fill up the mug with here, and I'll probably be back in about 10 minutes. All right. Talk to you soon.